Have you ever had the chaos of your business spill over into your relationships at home as a B2B entrepreneur? Or perhaps, have you ever had the chaos of home life flood your business? Hey, I'm J.R. Lay. Welcome back to another episode of the Level Up Business Podcast. Now, today's episode is one that you're not going to want to listen to alone. That's because we're going to explore how you can level up your business simply by escaping the chaos, connecting deeply, and building an even bigger future by becoming a cohesive couple at home. But first, I'd like to invite you to text me at 832-240-1922. That's because I will text you a copy of my best-selling book, Banking on Chains, so that you can level up your business and your life as a B2B entrepreneur. Joining me for today's conversation is Tom Bauer. Tom is the co-author of the book, The Cohesive Couple, Escape the Chaos, Connect Deeply, Build a Bigger Future Together. Welcome to the show, Tom. It is so good to share time with you today, buddy.
Hey, thanks, man. It's great to be here.
You know, you and Rebecca and James Lockwood, the three of y'all have written a book, The Cohesive Couple. And I love the subtitle. It's about escaping chaos so that you can connect deeply to build a bigger future together. I think about all of the pain, the chaos that I have experienced coming up on 19 years of marriage myself with my wife. She has been there since day one of my own entrepreneurial journey. And I started the business literally because of her. But I want to get into, why did y'all write this book to begin with in the first place?
You know, I think that both Rebecca and I, being business coaches, we saw the impact that just an overall framework, a simple structure, like I was an EOS implementer and coach for a long time, how that could really help organizations thrive.
Right.
And we started to just question, well, why can't this work in a relationship? And
Yes.
Rebecca took that home with her husband, James, and his first reaction to it was, hell no. Are you bat X crazy? I am not having a weekly meeting. Why do we need to write our goals down? We're married. It should be obvious. And, but over time, they started doing this and using some of the tools and bringing in things from 1,000 years ago all the way until, things today from Chapman or Gottman or, Peter Drucker or Yerkes Dodson. And, these things started to work. And out of that, then I was using that in my marriage. And we started to build this framework that couples can use that we call the cohesive system. And, we effectively took, about 1 million pages of research and teaching and theory and boiled it down into something that is simple and practical and digestible. And as we were going through this journey, here was our biggest discovery, is that a moderate amount of structure in a relationship produces the highest levels of alignment, connection, and achievement, right? When you say it that way, it kind of makes sense, right? If you don't have any structure, you have chaos. You're in a firefighting system, right? Where you're just going from, and I'm sure you experienced that with, little kids, and just all the different, yeah, exactly. 4 of them, right? So, it's what sport, who's picking up whom, who, when, where, what's happening. And you combine that with an entrepreneurial journey and you have a perfect storm right there, because doing that just in what I'll call a normal job is hard enough. But you throw in an entrepreneur into that mix where things are changing a lot, right? Your business is already chaotic enough. And then you throw in your family life. And so we just saw that going through that when there's no structure, you have chaos. When there's too much structure, though, you can't adapt. You can't be flexible, right? To life as it changes. You can't take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you.
Right.
So it's that little bit of moderate structure that really helps couples align, connect, and thrive.
That align, that connect, that thriving. And I'm glad you opened up the book this way. It was an author's note. It says, this isn't a couples therapy book. You said, if you're looking for that, you're in the wrong place. It's the practicality though that I find the benefit from, because it's a system, it's a framework, and it's super interesting understanding EOS and the 90-day cycle. We were already beginning to integrate some of that methodology, philosophy into our home. Even down to every night for dinner, we would ask the kids, what was one good thing about your day? Like starting
Right.
off with strategic coach, the positive focus,
Yep.
learning that from
Yep.
Dan. And that was a massive game changer, but that was a system. That was just something that we started to build in and a day out basis. But when you look at the cohesive model, I
Hmm.
want to unpack this, and I'm glad that you framed it. Structures, systems are not bad. And I would say that was it's been a challenge for me as
Hmm.
an entrepreneur, particularly with a Colby profile of 3294. So I'm a resistant follow through. I'm looking to break systems,
Right.
or find ways to shortcut things.
Right. Right.
Before, and I want to come back to that point in just a minute, because you have the cohesive model. Can we unpack that model?
Sure, sure. And just for the record, my Colby is 3492. So
Okay,
so I am not a big structure person. I do not like to follow structure.
right.
So for those of people who are listening, for your audience, if
A
that's
lot of
kind of your
entrepreneurs.
mode, this still works even for people like us. And for those of
Yeah.
you who love detail and structure, there's enough here. But if we look at our model, to your question, there are really four key vital elements in any relationship, right? Family, couple, etc. The first is your mindset. And the second is, and I'll go back to these, your vision. The third is your action. And the fourth is connection. And each of those four elements needs to be incredibly strong. Mindset, let's start there. And why did we start the book with mindset? Because our belief and what we've shown is that you get the relationship that you're ready for. The way that you approach problems in your relationship, do you put the problem between you, or do you put the problem in front of you to solve together? Do you look at it as binary, or do you find a way for both of you to get what you want? And there's a great story of James and Rebecca, my co-authors, and the ultimate cohesive couple. Uh, Rebecca, if she had her druthers, she would have a backpack and that's it, and just travel the world, and with no plans, nothing. She would just go wherever. James, he's a high fact finder, low quick start. Oh, he wants the white picket fence and the stability. So
Yes.
they found a way, though, for them both to get that. So they have their house in Columbus, Ohio, but then they winter in Breck, where the kids ski in a
Mhm.
fifth wheel. And then they take their fifth wheel around the country for a while. And right now they're on a 12, 18 months journey. And they do that, but they still have their home base and they still have stability. So they put the problem in front of them and they figured out a way they could get that together. That's a representation of mindset right
Let's
there.
let's pause on that point just a minute, because I think it's easy to see beyond of what you're talking about. Looking at a problem or an opportunity, is it between us or is it in front of us? It's a matter of perspective, because if it's in between us, is it possible that it could divide us? Versus
Ac-
we're then solving something in front of us together. We're going towards, or we're moving towards, a future state.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. When the problem's between you, you tend to clash, you tend to create tension, right? Because you're both trying to win. And then you're creating a relationship operating system that is a I win, we lose system. And that's
Mhm.
not a very
Zero
effective system
sum.
for the long term, just have to
Mhm.
say. And I experienced that myself. And my first marriage was a I win, we lose relationship. And that doesn't work. So you need the right mindset. or all the other tools, everything that we teach really doesn't matter.
When I think about what you have done with this operating system and the way that you're describing this, you have person A and then you have person B in the relationship. But what the operating system does is it adds an objective third party, a trifecta, a
Mhm.
triangle.
Right.
And so a lot of times what I've found in just my own marriage is I might be saying one thing over here, and my wife, Delina, she may or may not be receiving what I'm trying to communicate, and or vice versa. She might be saying one thing over here, and more likely than not, I'm not hearing her for what she's trying to communicate. But what I have found is when we integrate tools, models, frameworks, systems, adding that objective quote unquote third party, and then we communicate through the tool, it becomes much easier to understand and receive or to communicate for that matter.
Correct.
What changes the dynamics there?
A couple of different things change the dynamics. One you hit on, the overall system itself gives you the tools and the framework with which to have discussions. So, for example, in the vision section, we have what we call our CVP or cohesive vision plan. And when you're evaluating decisions, you can go back to your core values that you've written down. You can go back to your why. Why are we together as a couple or a family? You can go back to your big dream or your 3-year picture or your 1-year goals. And those take a lot of the emotion out of the decision making process and help you go, do we do this or not? For example, one couple, they were looking at a house, perfect piece of property, exactly what they wanted, getting it at 50 cents on the dollar. But they looked at their vision and they said, buying this house doesn't align with our vision. And so they said no to that opportunity. The other thing about that is within the connect section or the connect element, we have what we call a shared language. And this ties a lot of things together, but it's not my job to communicate to you the way I want you to hear me. It's my job to change my communication so that you're receiving it the way
Yes.
you can receive it. And all of that comes within the framework of our 4 elements in terms of that shared language. So we know what we're talking about, an aligned vision. And then we also even have a tool that we use, a money assessment, to look at your money personalities. Because money can be a big point of friction in a relationship.
Let's pause on that point because, I think about the entrepreneurial journey, and it has been something that has come up in recent conversations as well. Um, you have what's called the tool, the money sink.
Mhm.
I like the chapter. It's framed as a question. Money causes arguments? Question mark. Um, what are the patterns that you see here around money in regards to the relationships that couples have to navigate and journey through, specifically even in an entrepreneurial home where
Mhm.
sometimes money fluctuates based upon time, seasons of life, seasons of the business for that matter.
Sure. And some of this comes down to your money personality, right?
Mm,
So Wendy, my wife, she's kind of the spendthrift Sally. She doesn't like spending money. But to me, I'm kind of delusional Dan. I think that anything, it's all gonna happen and it's gonna be great. So to me, money is just it's a tool that I use, but it's going to happen. I'm not worried
yeah,
about it. So by understanding each other's uh, personalities and viewpoints that really, probably were ingrained in us before we were 7 years old,
mhm,
um, then we can really talk through some of the issues. Having that monthly money sync where you pick just one topic and spend 30, 40 minutes on it really helps alleviate a lot of the money tension because you get on the same page with your priorities, how
mm,
we're spending money, and who's going to do what, who has which role regarding money.
yeah.
Um, and what are just our kind of, hey, is it okay? Can I spend $500 without checking with you? Or is that limit really 50? and on what types of things. And by talking through those things, as opposed to waiting for them to happen and blow up into an
Mhm.
argument, we proactively address them ahead of time. And that eliminates anywhere from 50 to 80% of the discussions.
When you think about the idea, coming back to the subtitle of chaos, I
Yeah.
think there's some things that lead up to that. I even
Yes.
reflect on my own personal experience. There's confusion, which is a lack of clarity.
Yep.
Um, there's change, constant change,
Yep.
which we think about just the different stages of life. Um, there's some sort of conflict, and I think it's when we're in that constant state of conflict that's unresolved. That's then the result of that is then this chaoticness that we feel. Where do couples go off the path? What leads them down that path of chaos that it might not feel that way
Hmm.
at a particular moment, but if you pause and you reflect 90 days, a year, or 3 years, like, oh my gosh, we just are completely out of sync right now.
Hmm. Yeah. I think there's two things there where couples get out of alignment. The first is just having a written kind of goals or plan or vision just written down. I've seen couples talk about, hey, I want to retire in Phoenix. And the other person saying, I hate Arizona, but we've been going there 14 years. I thought you loved it. No, I go there because you like golf, but I don't. I mean, with it just, you get a lot of stuff out on the table and can clear it up by just writing down your vision. But
Yes.
more importantly than that is having a weekly sync, right? And I don't want to call it a meeting, but that's what it is.
Hmm.
Because there's always one person in the couple that's going to object to we have to have a meeting as a couple. Are you crazy? But
Right.
by having that 45 minutes where you just sit down and you look at who's doing what when for the next 7 days, you avoid a lot of that chaos, those urgent phone calls or texts. Hey, are you picking up Johnny? Hey, who's doing this? Oh, wait, we're supposed to meet two different people on Saturday night. We got three conflicting things. You just avoid all that by just
Yes.
having 45 simple minutes. That's 0.04% or 0.4% of your week. It's not a big time commitment to sit down. So that's the other way that couples go off the rails.
Well, I want to come back to this idea of the operating system and how it's framed because you have the vision and the plan, the cohesive vision and the plan. And I like the way it's framed with the chapter. It's got to be written down.
Yes, 100%.
What happens if it's not written down? Is that where some of that misalignment? It's like because I think of some couples and my wife and I, it's like when we got married, we literally had written down goals.
Hmm.
And it was amazing to see what we accomplished with those goals. And then we started having kids, and then like those behaviors, whether we were doing them consciously or probably more unconsciously in early marriage, when you added the variability of kids, that's when I think we started the misalignment crept in because we
Yep.
stopped writing things down, we stopped checking in.
Yep. Yep.
What what's the purpose of writing it down?
Well, I think there's a couple of things you gain out of it. There's a lot of science behind, you'll have anywhere from a 30 to 70% better chance of accomplishing your goals when you write them down. But
Hmm.
as you were saying, you have one person, and then the system. By
Yes.
writing them down, you both go back to that system all the time to stay aligned and to
Right.
stay in sync. On top of that, though, part of our overall system is not just, the weekly 45 minutes, but every quarter, every
Yes.
90 days, um, you know, going forward, you get together, whether you take 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday morning, or you take 2 days and make it a nice little weekend out of it. We encourage all of our couples to do quarterly planning and
Hmm.
quarterly retreats. So every 90 days, my wife and I go away. We spend the weekend and we just talk about what worked well the last 90 days, what didn't, and more importantly, what does the future, the next 90 days look like? We review our vision as
Mhm.
well. And for our annual trip, we actually made a ritual out of it. But we go to Philadelphia right before Christmas and we spend 4 days in Philadelphia. And as we're walking around and going to shows and doing things, we look at the next year. We reset our 3 year vision, our 1 year plan. But having that kind of 90-day cadence keeps that where all of a sudden 3 years have gone by, your kids are now 6 and 3 years old, and you're like, who are we?
Yes.
You know?
Oh, yeah, we have been there and we have asked that very question. Can I come back to you? You
Yeah.
framed about the quarterly sync and then the annual sync and the review of what went well. It's something that I wrote about in Banking on Change, and
Yeah.
WELL is an acronym. Do you mind if I integrate that and
Sure.
just give like a layer
Please.
on top?
Yeah.
Because we've done this as a couple. We've done this with our kids. We do this as a team here with the Level Up Business team and with the entrepreneurs that we work with. And WELL is an acronym for winning, exciting, learning, and looking.
Mhm.
Meaning, what were the biggest wins that we had over the last day, week, quarter, year? What are we most excited about right now in the present moment? What did we learn over the last day, week, quarter, year? A lot of
Yep.
those learnings is what could be perceived as a failure or some sort of a struggle. And we're able to transform that into a lesson that we can apply then going forward. And then the last piece of it is what are we looking forward to most over the next day, week, month, quarter, year? And so
Yep.
that what has been going well is it's a Swiss Army knife, if you will, of the past, of the
Yeah.
present, and then provides a path towards the future.
Yeah. I love that acronym. And we actually have incorporated that unknowingly into the weekly sync and into our quarterlies because we start with gratitude. What went well? What are we excited about? Where do we win? And then we end it with what are you most looking forward to? So I ask Wendy, and we just did our weekly sync yesterday. I said,
Yeah.
Wendy, what are you most looking forward to in the next week? So I can make sure that happens for you.
Hmm.
And we do the same thing at our quarterlies, where it's really about, and we really try to incorporate the mindset of progress, not perfection. We're,
Yes.
we're if we're not making mistakes, we're not growing as a couple. If we
Right.
don't struggle through one or two things, we're not challenging each other enough. We're not asking the hard questions. And certainly that should not be 99% of your conversation. But, every couple has their sweet spot of challenge and growth and how to incorporate that. But I
Yes.
think you're spot on with that is, what do we do well? And then looking forward, what can we incorporate? What opportunities do we have? How can we continue to make progress? Because we'll never reach nirvana, and that's
Yes.
okay.
Well, and I think once you reach one level of the mountaintop, you're going to want to go. If you're curious, you're going
Yeah.
to see another mountain. It's going to be an even bigger mountain, and you're going to
Yes.
climb that mountain. But sometimes you're going to have to go through the valley to then level up to the next mountain. But
Yes.
if you put that future in front of you that you're working towards together, it changes the dynamics.
It does. And, part of that is why our community of growth minded couples is so powerful because
Mhm.
there are people that are at that next peak that can help you get through that valley. And
Right.
there's people that are at this peak behind you that you've just gone through that you can help. And so
Yeah.
you're learning from each other and challenging each other. And it's like, oh, wait, your kids are about to leave for college. You want to talk about that? Because our kids did that 5 years ago. Let me tell you what happened and how we needed to adjust. And you just get that from it's just a growth, abundance minded, group of people. It's fun.
It is, and it really is the hero's journey, and I think, you see that in a lot
Yep.
of narratives, but probably this is the nerd in me as we start to wrap up, but you saw that in Star Wars, right? You
Right.
saw Obi-Wan training Luke, and then Luke becomes the guide then for Rey, and then the cycle just it's a virtuous cycle that the hero eventually becomes the helpful guide for the next generation of heroes to follow, but we always want to lift up that next generation to avoid the pitfalls, to avoid the traps, and what you're doing in that community sounds so wonderful. Speaking of, if someone is watching, listening, they want to connect, continue the conversation that we've started here today, Tom, what's the best way for them to A, reach out to you, B, get a copy of the book, and C, join the community that you're talking about here?
The easiest way is to go to our website, cohesivecouple.com. Cohesivecouple.com. The second is you can email me, tom@cohesivecouple.com. That's easy. And then the third is, you can pick up our book on Amazon, The Cohesive Couple, and you can listen to it on Audible, or you can read it, however you want. Do we have 30 seconds for me to add one more thing, JR?
Absolutely.
Because you touched on something that I really wanted to get to, and that is, it's not just that virtuous cycle with other couples, but think about the legacy you're leaving for your kids, because they watch how you interact. Other couples watch how you interact. They watch how you solve arguments. They watch how you fight, right? They watch how you embrace each other and build your connection over time and keep it sustained. You're impacting, not just your own relationship, but you're impacting the world around you, because you're going to demonstrate greatness or the opposite of that. And what legacy and impact, because legacy is not the money you leave. It's the values, the traditions, the habits, the things that you've instilled in other people around you. That's your legacy. And that's really ultimately what excites me about being able to give this program to our children and see them incorporate it into their relationship and now with our grandkids. Pretty cool stuff. Thanks for letting me 30 seconds.
Well, no, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because it is such a wonderful way to wrap up, to share, because it's about a future. It comes back to the title of the book. It is Escaping the Chaos, Connecting Deeply, Building a Bigger Future Together. So thank you for sharing time. Thank you for sharing time together with me.
Thank
you.
you.
Those watching today, Tom.
Thank you very much.